because we learn by asking questions, smart questions and stupid questions alike, and we wanted to have fun. So I hope you had fun over the past 2 weeks that have been hectic for most of us. I want to start by thanking our co-host, the INSPIR Center in São Paulo, Brazil, the Bertha Center in South Africa, Ashoka University in India, and the big Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University in the US. So it has been great fun to work with our partners. Today, I'm helped by Elle Carter in getting you along the presentation of your work. I will just start by reminding you about INDIGO, which is a data collaborative. So the ambition of INDIGO is to bring together a community of people who want to use data to generate better social outcomes. We are hosting it on the GoLab webpage at the moment, but we do really see this as a distributed governance initiative. So we hope you will be part of this initiative in the long term. And over the past 2 weeks, we've been doing some playing on a number of challenges that were proposed by the community. And what we are doing today is present to you some of the thinking and some of the learning that came through. So let me highlight that the session today is being recorded so that people who are not able to join due to other commitments or because they are on the wrong time zone will be able to see what we've been doing in the past 2 weeks and contribute to our conversation. We structured the day with a number of cluster presentations. So we had 9 challenges and we are presenting them 3 at a time. Every presenter will have, every team will have 5 minutes to present what they did, and then there will be a 10 minutes feedback. Everybody will be invited to provide some feedback, but I'll come back later on how we are providing some of this feedback to make sure that nobody's shy and we get going straight away. But let me share with you something that I'm very excited about. That tells you the contribution that we received in the past 2 weeks. On this map, you can see how the geographic spread of people who contribute to the Hack and Learn, and it's really encouraging to see people coming from all over the world. I was surprised we didn't have enough people from Australia and New Zealand. We will do better next time, although I know Vanessa was based in New Zealand, so there is incomplete data here. So fantastic to learn from colleagues from all over the world, looking at the data in their regional setting and learning from people coming with a completely different set of idea, perception, and skills. I don't want to take too much of my time, so what we're going to do now in this show and tell, as I said, we will have the presentation of the first 3 challenges. We cover a broad spectrum of topic, and I'm asking, we will have some hosts to kick us off with some feedback, and Elle, who will moderate the question and answer, will also call on teams to offer a perspective, and to give everybody the opportunity to speak, we will ask Hackteam 12 to comment on the presentation of Hackteam 4, Hackteam 4 on Hackteam 5, 5 on 6, 6 on 7, and so on. So every team will comment on the team following them. But before we start with the show and tell, I wonder if Radana, can I ask you to share a view? Radana has been very active in this space, and she's been a great supporter of creating a learning platform. And the Hack and Learn was something completely new to her. So if I think you are in the room, I can't see you because there are too many people here. Do you want to share your impression?
I'm here. Thanks very much, Mara, and Hopefully you can all hear me. Brilliant to be here with everybody. I'm Rodana Kova. I work for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK government in our impact investing team. And many of you will know that we've been piloting outcomes-based instruments and impact bonds, especially over the past, well, now close to 5 years, and have an ambition to take the instrument to scale and expand the use of these partnerships, especially with domestic governments. We are absolutely aware, and I'm ashamed to say we've probably contributed partly to this, of the fact that data in this space currently is still relatively messy in times, with many bespoke approaches to data collection and to reporting. And at worst cases, it's just not available. It's really hard to come by. So it's been very hard for us to paint a good picture of what the market looks like. And painting that picture at the same time is really, really important if we're ever to move from individual smaller pilots to mainstreaming and to bringing outcomes-based approaches to the forefront and to become kind of a business as usual for government. The last couple of weeks have demonstrated one thing to me, which probably was obvious to many of the rest of you who have been leading hack teams so well, and that is that there are no easy answers to many of the questions that we're posing so far. Much of this involves, at this point in time, painstaking work, whether it's in data collection, in interpretation, and in analysis. But what I am is really encouraged by the work that we've all started over these past 2 weeks. As Mara said, it's a start. We don't yet have complete answers, but I'm encouraged by the progress through the INDIGO partnership, and really, really looking forward to the presentations today. So with that, I will hand over back to Mara and colleagues and just say a huge thanks to everybody. It has been brilliant getting a hands-on feel for a lot of what your work entails, and I really am looking forward to presentations.
Thank you, Rodana. So I'll pass over to you, El. As in the kickoff meeting, you will have only 5 minutes to go through the insights from the past 2 weeks. And at the 4 minutes, I'm gonna bring my xylophone to tell you have 1 minute to go. El, over to you.
Great, thank you. So it's my job and my delight to introduce all of the challenge teams to feedback on their activities from the past 2 weeks. Before we get into that, I just wanted to remind us that we're calling this a hack and learn. It's not a hackathon. And I think a lot of members of the Indigo community really see this as a learning community. And as Rodana said, we don't have all the answers. There are no easy answers, but we really progress by learning together. So there's no shame in getting things wrong. There's no worries about going down blind alleyways or getting a bit stuck. Please share all of that learning with this group. We want to hear about what went wrong as well as what went right. And we're also very keen to hear questions. So please do feel able to post questions or comments or ideas into the chat, and then we can pose them to each of the challenge teams as we move through this session. Great. So first of our hack challenge teams to feedback is hack team 4. So we have Fernando and Anna ready to feedback. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Al. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And I thank you all involved with ourselves in facing such an interesting challenge. So here, hack team number 4 tries to investigate the linkages between OBCs and the UN SDGs. We have 4 main questions. So first, what the OBCs have already done in terms of SDGs? What are stakeholders' main motivations? why, if there are any SDGs that are left aside, and what are potentially unforeseen synergies that might be identified and are useful for engaging stakeholders, investors, and others. But what did we do then? Basically, we analyzed different social outcomes, so outcome metrics from all the education projects and completed the spreadsheet with data on SDGs alignment. So basically, we checked whether different outcome metrics relate to the different 17 SDGs and the targets within each goal. Here, before narrowing our analysis to education, we have a Sankey diagram for the INSPIR dataset covering all the contracts we have, more than 300 contracts. And we see that indeed, quality education, the SDG number 4, is a relevant one in the OBCs overall. If we take a step further and investigate the INDIGO dataset in the next slide, please. We have here that in the policy area, of course, it makes sense. The contracts are focusing the SDG number 4, quality of education, and more specifically, the target for 1, related to enrollment and learning outcomes. But instead of using metric counts, as we have here in the left side, we could check for other characteristics. Please, the slide before. And instead of metric counts, we may take a look on service users, for instance. And then we see the target for 1 is the one that is more important. So the targeted population is mostly concentrated in this target. We might have used different characteristics, amount of investment, stakeholders involved, and there are a lot that we can still play around to investigate how these linkages are organized. In the next slide, here, if you are interested in this, we have the Jupyter, and if you know how to code and you want to do that yourself, this is available. Our colleagues is going to share that with you in the chat. And now I invite Anna to share her experiences with us.
Yes, so how did we do it? So it was a bit challenging, but we found a way of tracking these and being consistent between everyone that was participating in the challenge. What we did was to find the keywords for each outcome and then try to find the keywords that could match in the SDG goal and target. So for example, we had one outcome that was student enrollment defined by the out-of-school girls between age 7 and 14 enrolled in school. So what we did was find the keywords, so student, out of school, girls, age between 7 and 14, and find in the targets which was that, of course, we found that education outcomes are related with other outcomes, of course. So with employment, inequalities, gender equality, and healthcare. Next slide. And the final one. So next steps, we defined 2 next steps. The first one is to continue to work on data. So going behind the education and do it for other sectors. And then to have a filter for the SDGs, so people could see this graph, not only focus on here or a country or something like that, but also focus on, I just want to see education, SDG for education or poverty or whatever. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you. I love those beautiful Sankeys and really impressed by the way you tackled those challenges of having multiple SDGs that might be relevant. Great. So please do everyone feel able to post questions or comments for the group in the chat. What I suggest we do is we'll take the presentations in blocks of 3. So I'll move over to the next group of presenters now, and then we'll take questions as a group. So next up to present is Hackteam 7. So welcome and thank you to Icaro and Gabriella who are joining us. Thank you.
So, hi everyone. I don't see the slides yet.
I think they're coming. Oh, did I introduce the wrong people?
Hi, sorry.
Yeah, I think the next one is fine.
I did. I'm so sorry. I've already messed up with my one job. Please can I welcome Hack Team 5, Hilary, Natalie, Lee, and Franziska. Here we go.
Just 1 second, sorry. Had to recalibrate.
Alice, keeping you on your toes, Martina.
Yep. Here we go. Sorry about that.
Great. Yes, so I'm Hilary. I will be presenting on behalf of Challenge 5 User Voice this morning. Go ahead and next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the initial way that we proposed the challenge, or that Lee and Franziska proposed the challenge, is that we set out to explore how impact bonds are incorporating service users into many stages of the life of an impact bond. For instance, during commissioning, during co-developing for improving outcomes, during delivery, assessment, and even other stages of the project. Next slide, please. And what really motivated, it was a very small group, there were just 4 of us, but really what motivated us was that we all see service users and user voice and incorporating them more into impact bonds as a really exciting, promising, emerging field and practice. We all see there are a lot of benefits for incorporating service users into impact bonds during these different stages by making service provision more democratic, by empowering end users of projects, making projects more effective, and so on. And that there's a lot of opportunity for research and practice and development in this area, as there's still little data and information about how to measure the amount of user voice being incorporated and its potential impacts in these different ways. So just a very promising area to continue to explore. Next slide, please. And so the approach that we took during the past couple of weeks was to really focus on 5 questions about user voice in impact bonds, and basically different ways to collect and look at data. So how do we decide what data gets collected, what data to actually collect, how to collect this data, the pros and cons of different methods of collecting data, and then how to build capacity for different groups who want to collect data, and for service providers and end users who are participating in impact bonds to provide the feedback that maybe we're looking for. Next slide, please. And so just to sort of summarize where that discussion took us during the past couple of weeks, we did talk a lot about the fact that there are still a lot of challenges for capturing data on user voice, particularly in incorporating it into a spreadsheet form or a database form, and that we do see a lot of opportunity and need still for more data collection from user providers, from service providers, and once they have collected that data, to actually share it with other practitioners and researchers for learning. But we did identify a couple of potential ways that that could be done moving forward in the future. So for instance, using civic technology, using user narratives to tell stories about their journeys through the use of service provision, and even potentially content coding, the use of personal assessments. And so that sort of summarizes where we were at that stage. But we're really excited about continuing this work. And so hopefully we will get some more individuals to participate and continue moving the conversation forward. And so I will pass it over to Natalie, who will just quickly share an infographic that she put together, sort of summarizing our work as well.
Hello, everyone. Are you able to see my screen? Great. So I worked with this Hackteam 5, and we were all very excited about this new emerging field, user voice. So the first infographic that we created just summarizes what Hilary spoke to earlier, is user voice across the impact bond ecosystem. And I'm hoping this infographic can help new members of our hack team understand a little bit more about what we've developed and researched over these past 2 weeks, and also be a quick grab for information to help new people join and come on board. What I'd like to highlight from the infographic are some of the benefits of leveraging user voice. We hope that it can promote a more broadly inclusive policymaking process, cultivate a methodology and approach to utilizing user input and experience as a policy resource. Additionally, an opportunity to close feedback loops between providers and users. Also, it can be a mechanism to facilitate an iterative improvements to service delivery. And overall, what I think is most exciting is the opportunity to build trust between providers and users through facilitating more data and more innovative data into the social impact bond process. So overall, we're really excited about this new and emerging field, like I said earlier, and hoping that more and more people can get on board so we can continue to run with this idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hilary and Natalie, for sharing that with us. It's a really ambitious and important agenda, and I love the way you've used this life cycle to try and frame some of the thinking there. So just a reminder, everyone, please do keep the questions and comments coming in the chat. And next up, I'm going to try and get this right. We're going to pass over to Hack Team 6. So this is Juliana and Rory who are presenting from this Hack Team.
Okay, thank you, Elle. Can we go to the next slide? I'm going to show the outputs of Hackteam 6, which is the team about procurement documents and procurement processes. So what was our challenge? As you may know, every time a local government or the national government contracts a social impact bond, it has to go through a procurement process. I borrowed this image from the Open Contracting Data Standard website, and these are the 5 stages of a procurement process. So it starts with the planning, and then you go with initiation or tender, award, contract, and implementation. And each of these stages has a special document. Next slide, please. What did we do? We had a spreadsheet and we started looking for procurement documents and open contracting IDs. Each document has an open contracting ID in the open contracting dataset. And it is very useful because it is a unique identifier of that procurement document. And we would be in a place where we can link our INDIGO dataset with that unique identifier. So we would be able to understand much more about the procurement process behind each impact bond. We had columns for the open contracting ID, for the URL of the open contracting ID, and we also classified in another tab how easy or how difficult it was to get that document online and how much time we need to do that task. Next slide, please. And so what did we learn of these 2 weeks of looking for procurement documents on online portals? We learned that it is not easy, and for several reasons. Next slide, please. So when you cannot find a procurement document online, it is not necessarily because of a transparency issue or something else. Sometimes it is something else that is happening. So for example, we have the case of impact bonds with different names. Sometimes the community refers to the same impact bond with very different names. So here you have an example. INDIGO project number 162 for us at the Go Lab is the West London Zone project, and we all know it by that name. But when you go to the Contract Finder, which is the UK portal for contracts and procurement documents, you need to look for it as the Early Intervention Link Worker Support Service, which, as you may know, the connection is not so straightforward and is not intuitive at all. So this makes the task even more time-consuming, and it could be a bit messy, and you need to look for with different words, and you need to have different keywords to make this search work. Next slide, please. Then it is also difficult to navigate some procurement portal, especially for the countries that do not have one unique portal for all the country. So for example, this is a case we analyzed with Mayra, and we realized that Colombia has 2 different portals. They have Colombia Licita, and they also have Colombia Compra, which is not wrong, but it can be difficult to be looking for one document in 2 different places. This is something that makes the job even harder. And the last thing I want to say is that it is very difficult to find contracts, but it is not impossible. I couldn't find one single contract from the UK social impact bonds, but I know that some other contracts are out there. So for example, we have some contracts for the US projects, which are already linked to our impact bond data set, and you can find them in the bottom of the profile of each project. I know it's difficult to find them, but there are some of them out there, and we really want to try to get them to understand the terms and conditions under which the different key stakeholders contract an impact bond. Next slide, please. Our next steps for this team is to keep looking for these documents and to keep looking for the open contracting ID of these documents, so we can make the link or the connection in our data set. And each time you get into the profile of any of our impact bonds, you can get to know more how that impact bond was negotiated and how the procurement process developed. So we are still looking for more people to work. This is very time consuming, but on the other side, it is really, really interesting. And there are lots of insights that we can still get from this job. So if you're interested, we are still on our Slack channel and we are waiting for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing us how you went about tackling and hunting for that procurement and contracting information. It's really interesting to see the bumps in the road that you hit, as well as the successes that you have had in finding the information. Okay, I've got Carolyn Heinrich, who's kindly agreed to offer some comments and feedback on the first set of presentations. So Carolyn, can I ask you to come on with some feedback for the groups?
Sure. I think so. I was part of Hackteam 6, and I think one of the things that we can all learn from a hack and learn like this, that 2 weeks goes very fast. We have there's a lot that you learn just starting to dive into your question and project, and so I actually, my main reflection is that people did really dig in and learn quite a bit in a short time. And I think one of the things that, I don't know, I guess you would call it a phrase that I've thought about, I think I started when I was in graduate school, but one of the things, it's like just a phrase, the more you know, the more you realize how little you know, right? So as you start down a process of trying to understand acquired knowledge, oh, there's so much to explore here. And so I kind of feel like, that's sort of what we encounter in these hack and learns, is that you start down a particular track thinking you have a question that's pretty straightforward, and you realize, oh, there's so much here. Just for example, we could just see even in the chat, the number of comments, for example, on the previous presentation, where we're thinking about the user voice and all the different ways you could even think about how user voice could be important, how we would capture it, and whose voice is in there. And so I feel like this is one of the things from the hack and learn, is that we realize as we get into there that, oh, it's like opening a door, right? And then realizing, oh, there are so many choices, then we have to kind of open the next door. So I would say that this is valuable, and that we do need to all, I think, keep working, and then maybe what happens is as we build these teams and continue to acquire knowledge, is we may even have to think about sub teams for different areas, or maybe find ways that we can, the Slack channel is, I think, helpful for communication, but it really, this kind of coming together, I think we need to have this kind of coming together among teams as well as we move forward. So just a few reflections on this, but it's certainly, I'm impressed by what people are putting together in just 2 weeks' time.
Many thanks, Carolyn. And again, just restating a big thanks to those teams for sharing all the hard work across the past 2 weeks. We are inviting one hack team to comment on the work of another. So I was wondering if Hack Team 12, so Ian or Myra or someone from Hack Team 12, if you had a question or a comment on Hack Team 4's presentation.
Can we go back to see everybody so I can read the body language of my hack team mates? I have a question that I posted that was, whenever I try, if I can give one question, I was wondering if you had problem in mapping project with SDGs. Whenever I try, sometimes, like I think it's more than one, or maybe I'm not clear, the SDGs sometimes are very broad. And so I was wondering if you developed a way to create consistency in your scoring, and if you had advice on how to go forward.
Maybe I can answer that. So I think finding the words and sharing with everyone was really useful. And another thing that helped was not thinking in projects, but thinking about outcomes, because projects may have a lot of outcomes. So we had some that have 4 or 5, and some of them include a lot of stuff. And when you go to the micro and see, okay, so this is just these outcomes. So let me find these words on the SDGs. It's much easier because you think in parts, no, you don't get overwhelmed with all the information. So I think dividing it in outcomes helps, and also having the keywords that we shared with everyone else also helps everyone, because we could bring some consistency.
Yeah, I'm so impressed with the use of those keywords. I think that's a real fantastic contribution to supporting people to do this coding. I think it's fantastic. Thank you. Icaro, I noticed that in the chat you had some comments for the user voice team, particularly thinking about other places that they might look for how to do this. Could you come in and elaborate on that?
Yes. So basically, if I was able to understand, the premise of the user voice challenge was about to try to understand different strategies of how OBCs or all the field captures user voice and uses it. So I think I already saw in the past that some managerial frameworks such as Lean Management and Six Sigma, they already do this in the beginning. So I think sometimes we don't find data on OBCs. So could we perhaps find data on applications of Six Sigma and Lean Management and try to transpose it to the problem of OBCs? I don't know if it was clear my question.
Thanks, Icaro. Hilary, Natalie, or Lee, I don't know if you have thoughts on this. Maybe Francisca?
I'm just trying to understand where exactly would you gather this data? In evaluation reports then, or?
I mean, like, I believe there are some reports of industries and papers of applications, simple applications of Lean Management is Six Sigma. And I do know that in the beginning of the process, they do have explicit efforts to capture the user voice. So I thought, perhaps if we don't have data on OBCs that we do want, we could have the next best thing that is something similar but in another field. I don't know. It's just basically an idea, a suggestion.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. It's brilliant to see that there's so much energy in the chat, people making recommendations, sharing links and ideas. So it's fantastic to keep those ideas bubbling away there. And I wondered if I could just ask the procurement and contract team to maybe respond to some of the questions in the chat. There's been quite lively discussion about the potential to automate some of this. So I don't know, Juliana or Rui, do you want to pick up on some of the suggestions that are coming through?
I think that's very welcome. And some of the work that's being done by the Open Contracting Partnership in trying to develop OCDS is that the data can be shared and reused. So I think it is possible to automate these things using things like the Open Contracting ID. One of the challenges in the UK is that local governments put a lot of their procurement documents on third-party sites for a limited amount of time. They use that service, and then there's a lot of concern around in the UK around sort of confidentiality and commercial sensitivity that doesn't exist in some other places, because the other places have just said clearly, like, this is what we're going to do. I think one of the things that there's some reform efforts happening. There's a green paper out in public procurement. My message to people who are involved in buying these would be really sort of like, hey, govies, and I use that term like because it's deliberately annoying. Hey, govies, also buy the data. Like, make it really clear to people that you want to buy these data, and then publish it using an open, government license through these various processes that exist. So that would be my suggestion.
Sorry, not sure how the civil servants and public managers feel about being called govies, but we'll see. It's certainly provocative. Okay, I'm mindful of time, and so I'd love to move us now on to the next set of 3 presentations. Ikaro, I'm so sorry for dive bombing you out of order earlier, but now it really is over to Hackteam 7. So Ikaro and Gabriella, we would love to hear from you.
Okay. So, hi everyone. So in the next slide, we resume our discussion about how outcome measurement is a challenge thing. So we do know that priorities.
This thing is $300.
There's somebody that should be on mute. We got it. Cool.
Okay, may I continue?
Well, we're thinking about throwing some more challenges at you, Echo, just to make it more fun. You've had to deal with being put on the first and all these extra noises. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Oh, it's okay. I think it's part of the challenge.
Yes.
So, a point we did made in this process is that outcome measurement is challenging. So we know that the priorities, they do not have a nice fit in outcome evaluation, and that girls' education projects, they bring even more complexity to some already complex problem. So in this complex
I think that we are experiencing some Zoom bombing, so I left the meeting. So
we're good. Leave and reconnect straight away. At what you do in this case, it never happened before.
Oh, it's okay. We're good. We just removed the iPhone that was.
Okay, it was an iPhone. Okay, fine. I don't know how to deal with it. Thank you.
So may I continue? Okay. So in the next slide, since we already talked about this one, we can show you some achievements we made in this process. So we were able to start building a community, as you can see on those screenshots of our Slack channel. We were able to identify some issues that we usually don't have the time to do so. And we also were able to make some activities in the hack and learn aspects of our challenge. In the hack side, we were able to analyze some data on OBCs, both in the INSPER and the INDIGO datasets. And in the learn side, we were able to share knowledge. So our teammates were able to search around the internet about some documents that could help us to know more about this field. So in the next slide, we show you some of as examples of those documents. And we have a very diverse range of documents. Some documents are about the simple aspects, the basics of outcome measurement, while others are about girls' education issues, really relevant issues, such as child marriage, health issues, sexual violence, and empowerment. So with all this information that we were able to learn and we are gathering to help us to continue this effort, we also made some things in the hack side. In the next slide, we show some results of our analysis. So in the INSPIRE dataset, we analyzed 45 OBCs in education and social care, and we found that only one focuses on girls' education out of those 45. Also, in analyzing those 45 OBCs, we focus on outcome metrics, if those outcome metrics are useful to girls' educations. We search if those OBCs, they are maybe potentially affected by girls' education issues, and if they do are focusing in girls' education. And what we found that those outcome metrics in those related projects, they do not focus on girls' education, but they are related to education. Their outcome metrics, they might be useful for girls' education projects. They have a relation to that. On the other hand, we also found out that the outcome metrics on those related projects, they might be influenced by girls' education issues. However, gender is not yet considered on those. So they have some synergy that still is missing. So in face of all this complex discussion, we called for Gabriela to help us to give her testimony about how was the experience of this challenge. So Gabriela.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity and thank you, Icaro. I choose this challenge because for me, education is a powerful tool to make a society where everyone has equal opportunities, especially girls' education. So in the beginning of the challenge, I had a little bit, for me it was a little bit difficult because I didn't know anything about OBCs, but looking on the GEO lab, I found much information about it, and I could understand that and saw how it was related with my previous job. And this helped me to understand the OBC's data set and to analyze the information that we have there. And also helped me to look some organizations that I knew that they do a lot of evaluation, and to look up there if there was anything about girls' educational programs. And I think that the engagement of our team members could be improved a little bit. And if it was improved, we could have richer discussions and learn it even more with each other. Thank you all for this opportunity, and was really nice to participate on this Hack and learn even more about girls' education.
Thanks so much, Gabriela and Icaro. Brilliant to hear from you. And I think really interesting that this wasn't just a data challenge, but that there was a lot of conceptual work and thinking that had to go on behind this hack challenge. It's really great to hear more about that. Thank you. I'd now like to pass on to Hackteam 8. So this was the challenge that was supported particularly by the Beck Centre. And I'd like to invite Nora, Shirley and Veda to speak on behalf of this group.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Nora, and I'm a student analyst at the Beck Center. We worked on COVID-19 vaccination accessibility in the United States, which is a little different than what we started out with. Next slide, please. So we focused on accessibility because we were really interested in questions of equity. So we were wondering how website accessibility specifically is related to people being able to access their vaccination appointment. And we wanted to better understand how one actually goes about collecting information about vaccine appointments and how they can actually go through the steps to making an appointment. So we were really interested in both equity and access to protect individual and public health. Something that we thought about was both the federal and state laws and regulations that go into website design. So there is the federal law of Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 requires that agencies ensure that individuals with disabilities do have access to information, but this also still varies by state. Next slide, please. So we were wondering what the main accessibility barriers to creating a COVID vaccination appointment was. So what we did was we first created a spreadsheet for various federal and state COVID vaccination websites. And then we ran the URLs through Wave, which is a set of evaluation tools that helps authors and website designers make web content that makes it more accessible to individuals with disabilities. So this included things like whether alt text was available on the website, whether there were low contrast errors, which means that the color contrast between the text and the website background was significant enough that people with who need visual aids are still able to read it, and whether there were font size adjustments available or whether font was too small, and whether empty links were present on the website. So our team also included some language accessibility information, because some websites allow you to access translations within the website itself, whereas other websites you have to actually find a link to a separate website that is not as intuitive. So what we did was we created a user journey map to help visualize those accessibility challenges, and Shirley will present on that.
Okay, so this is similar in some ways to user voice, but this is focused on like a hypothetical experience. And just in general, or just conceptually, user journey maps help product designers, and this could be, obviously for-profits building products, but also services and programs for government providers, nonprofit providers, basically charting off different user journeys and how people experience, or what customers experience as problems, very generally. So we use this to help us understand where users face barriers in accessing vaccination information. So we created a hypothetical user persona for Clara, a woman. I'll describe a little bit more in depth on the next slide, based in Arizona. And here's the user journey map. It probably is a little small, but this is a woman who is 55, speaks Spanish, has some impairments, physical vision impairments, and doesn't have a car. So, and just in general, this experience starts off, there's a line right there in the middle between kind of negative and positive experiences. She starts off really positive and goes through and tries to access different web pages and encounters some ups and downs, as you can see. Also some delays. So she experiences, language issues and also difficulties with, I think that's the primary one at first. So she experiences delays in trying to get family members to come to help her. So anyway, you can probably look at this more in depth later, but the short synopsis here is that she finds a vaccination and tries to make an appointment, and it's just a loop of, lots of delays and lots of no appointments are available. And this is something that I actually did myself for her on her behalf, for being a hypothetical person. So very, very frustrating. Anyway, there are different barriers for accessibility that she experiences. Language, vision, oops, excuse me. So she just basically ends up not getting a vaccination. And I was really hopeful that I could get one for her, theoretically, but I could not. Next slide. Okay, so I just want to show you, we also collected data like many of the teams, and based the Arizona user map that I did on some of the information in here. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there's some future possible work, including, you know, filling out further the spreadsheet, making sure that our categories are standardized, because we had 3 different people working on stuff, and I'm not sure if, you know, we might have had some differences of opinion on some of the stuff. So another one is a big one, obviously, analyzing how basically internet access might affect vaccination rates, because all of this was on the internet that we looked at, obviously. And there's some other indexes around public health that we could also look at. Okay, well, that's it for us.
Great, thank you so much for sharing those insights. I think it's really interesting to see the way that you reshaped the challenge and gave it a slightly different focus to what was initially expected. I think it's brilliant to reveal when things pivot. That's really helpful. I'm also really interested to hear about the potential connections between the work that you did around accessibility and the relevance for the user voice group as well. I think is a really helpful thread to pick up on. Please do keep putting questions in the chat if you have those. It's great to see a lively discussion there. But now I'd like to turn to Hackteam 9. So Ruby, Annie and Anna, it's over to you.
Thanks, Elle. So I was the challenge leader for this Social Impact Wayfinder Hackteam 9 challenge, and I'm really excited to share our results with you guys. So just to give an introduction, this is an online tool that I built in conjunction with some other people on the team. And this is sort of the way it's supposed to work. So the idea is that if somebody is a social impact practitioner of some kind or an impact practitioner, and they don't know where to start or what to do to evaluate their impact, they can basically go through these 5 steps. And at the end, the tool outputs a list of custom resources that are narrowed down from a set of several hundred that we have collated. Next slide, please. So for this structure, what we wanted to do is essentially the tool already exists, and I wanted to kind of have a roundtable that's composed of both experts and beginners to give their feedback on how the tool works, whether it is functional, and also what things maybe don't make sense about the way it's set up, or things that maybe needed to be added, any comments that people have. And the way that we structured it was we paired off. So there was a relatively large group, and I asked people to just make pairs and then work together to talk to each other and click through the tool and identify what sort of feedback they have. Next slide, please. So just generally, these are sort of the first impressions, what people thought about the tool. People liked that it was simple, quick, easy to use. They thought that it was well explained, and they liked that you could just click through to the resources and that there was quite a lot of resources. They liked the fact that there was sort of an overview page of all of the appropriate custom resources, and then you could click into it to get a deeper dive of information. And they thought that overall, the resources that appear do seem to be the relevant and correct ones, and that it does actually suggest most of the ones that an expert might expect it to. But they didn't like there was some disagreement about a couple of the questions that are part of that 5-question framework, and maybe trying to fiddle with either the functionality of the tool or even just the wording to make it more clear, especially for beginners who are sort of the target audience. And then they also identified some technical inconveniences and glitches that we want to work through. And now I'll hand it off to Anna to talk about some of their recommendations.
Yeah, so our general recommendations were, one of them was to reword some questions. Some people found that some questions were not very well understood, like, for example, micro, meso, macro. So add examples would help. Also work through some new and reformulate the questions that exist, like the output format. So instead of having a lot of options, just summarizing quantitative, qualitative, and mixed. And then the impact goal was very confusing to have the SDGs together with other categories. It seems to exist a bit of overlap. So maybe we could reorient around the SDGs or remove it and create a new category. The second recommendation was regarding to create a user guide. So almost everyone in the team thought it was very useful to get a guide that everyone could go and see what is this definition or what people mean about this. The third recommendation is connected with making the results page more flexible. So one thing that everyone, I think, almost agreed is creating filters with help very much to filter the things that we want to see and not see so many resources with the questions. And also that add some additional relevant resources, and this was great to have people from all over places that they could contribute with resources that they are already using and we didn't know, or someone learn new resources to add into the platform. Next slide. So more technical recommendations, if possible, remove the page refresh upon each selection because it is a bit annoying for the user. Also the creating output filters on the results page, so it will be easier to navigate. Another thing is when you click each resource to open in a new tab, which helps to not open in the same, so you destroy your research page. And also questions related with some filters that didn't work correctly, and a couple of links were broken and could be fixed. And next slide, I pass to Hemi.
So I go over the long-term recommendations. So one was there are so many results, so creating a filter for the result page would be really useful, along with adding new extra data fields. For example, which SDG are we trying to target, or is the organization in the developed nation or developing nation, because the context of impact selection will differ over there. Then the next main important one was rank the resources along with based on the popularity or the relevance in the particular target they are trying to achieve. Then few others were allowing for export to the relevant spreadsheet, along with allowing users to add or create more resources for the result framework, and also add functions to reselect the framework questions from the result tab. I'll hand it over to Ruby for the participants.
Thanks, guys. Next slide, please. So finally, we just had some comments on the Hack and Learn itself. I think it was a really positive experience. We had a relatively large and diverse team, so it was really cool to get people's feedback on both the tool and also to just get people mingling and talking to each other. Some people said that they really enjoyed the fact that they were paired off and got to know each other one-on-one. And hopefully, I'm really hoping that we can have, a bit of networking and personal connections come out of this. And people also said that it was just fun to play around with the tool, to be some of the first people to get their hands on it, and to know that their suggestions can actually be implemented almost in real time to make something actually better. So that is the conclusion of our presentation.
Great, thank you so much for sharing those reflections. It's brilliant to hear that there are some real concrete improvements that you've identified for the tool, and also lovely to know that you had a good time along the way. So that's good to hear too. Mehdi, I know that you've been jotting down some notes for questions and comments for the groups. Can I come to you to kick off?
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Elle, and thanks for all the great presentations. We are a bit behind on time, so I'm going to be quick. So overall, all three projects are brilliant. The first one, Group 7, I think it was really smart to talk about that difference in between projects that are focused on girls and other projects that could affect girls as well. That's a general issue with gender studies. For example, there are lots of social impact bonds or outcome-based programs that are concerned with children's education, and they do target girls as well. And often, some of them even pay bonus for treating girls. So I know there's a development impact bond in Ghana that pays bonus if the provider treats girls. So that was brilliant. That segregation was really smart. I really like that. The second one, Team 8, I think the journey map and the user experience was a brilliant idea. Usually when we explore aggregated data, and aggregate doesn't necessarily mean a macro level national data. Lots of times, even if we study on a group or a community, we are still ignoring individuals' behaviors. And we just tend to call them exceptions or errors or noise. So it was really interesting, really helpful to see a user's journey, especially for such an issue that could have substantial impact on the outcome, because the outcome is controlling the spread. Even one person matters. The third team, team number 9, Rubiana and Amy, again, great work. I really like the way that they categorized comments that they received into general, technical, short-term, and long-term. We do believe this tool is really helpful. And I believe the comments were especially useful in improving the tool. So overall, great work, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you. There's, as ever, a lively back and forth going on in the chat. Ian, I noticed that you spotted a connection between some of the teams. Would you like to throw that out to the group?
Yeah, I was involved in the team 12 looking at pipeline for prospective services using social impact investment. And it just struck me that the Wayfinder and the structure that you've given to it there could be really usefully connected to pipeline, because people will go to the pipeline database with new ideas, looking for a little bit of guidance, but also people who maybe are just see a gap in the community and want to potentially use social impact investments. So I think there's a connection between those two bits of a database.
Great. I think it's excellent when you can begin to see those threads and connections across the team. Thanks for sharing that, Ian. Okay, so now let's pass over to our next group of presentations from Hackteam 10. Gautam, it's over to you.
Hi, can you all hear me?
We surely can, thank you.
Yeah. So just give me a second and share my screen. Yeah, is my screen visible? Just checking. Yeah. So just presenting this on behalf of Hackteam 10. As you all know, the challenge was to sort of bring about standardization within the NGO ecosystem services database that CSIP had collated. And in terms of the updates and my experience coordinating the challenge, here they are. Initially, it was sort of tough to sort of coordinate a common time between the participants considering the time zones. So there was a learning aspect that we wanted to share, perhaps have alternating hack weeks with 1 or 2 projects in the pipeline so that we could have resource allocation in a better way. That's just an initial thought. In terms of how we proceeded further basis available times, we sort of got on for a kickoff call, and eager participants sort of took on the work of cleaning the voluminous database with over 4,000 plus entries. In terms of the updates that and the progress that we've done, 60% of the work is done, rest 40%, some amount of cleaning as well as some amount of organization is required. If you're interested to sort of continue on this challenge, you're more than welcome to. And we at CSIP will be following up with additional tasks that would be completing the cleanup, uploading the portal, as well as working on a research paper that talks about the provision of or the geographical spread of service providers within the Indian ecosystem. And that is the work that we have thought out for the future. Thanks to the work of everyone who participated, there's a small snippet that you can just see. in the crowdsourced version of the database that you see on the top left, each organization was categorized for the services that they would provide. But since it was crowdsourced, a lot of repetition, a lot of redundancies were there. And thanks to the participants, we were able to sort of bring that duplication down as well. And thank you all for your time and effort, Dilata, Anirudh, Nirali, and Ishika specifically, and all the channel participants. Hopefully, happy to answer any questions, and hopefully we can complete this and take it onto the portal as well. That's all from my side for Hackteam 10.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, what a lot of work. And I think it's always overlooked the importance of dealing with messy data, duplicates, and you know, it's really so important to get everything working nicely and smoothly before we try to run analysis. So a really important job there, thank you. Can I pass now to Hackteam 11? Gautam, do you have a partner to present with as well on this?
Yes, Hackteam 11 has been a great team to work with. I think Sam Franz has been leading the efforts for Hackteam 11, so I invite him to sort of share the Hackteam 11's journey and all the learnings that they have. Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gautam. So if you want to reinforce the importance of cleaning up messy data sets, this is another great example. So we're working with a really amazing data set of 10 years of individualized donations that Ashoka collected through a right to information request. So these are mostly foreign donations to Indian nonprofits and all itemized. So it's a great data set and can help us understand who's giving, who's receiving, sort of where the money is going by sector, as well as geographically within India. But the data set needs a lot of work to be able to do that analysis and to be able to do it in a way that we're confident in. So one of the major contributions to our data set, and Gautam, I'm not sure if you're able to share the slides from this, was sort of the cleaning side. First, I think we'll have an illustration of this. The recipient side is very clean because organizations are required to file to the government the donations they receive. All the recipients are identified by a unique ID number. The donor side is very messy because it's whatever the organization's accountant happened to write in. So here you can see just a subsample of the various permutations of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the largest donors. Part of our work was going through and ranking sort of the top donors, and then through a manual process, deduplicating the top entries. It was important to do this manually because many distinct entities have similar names. For example, ActionAid versus ActionAid India versus ActionAid, UK or US. An automated deduplication might get lumped together. So we did this, manually to ensure accuracy. In addition, we added value to the data set another way, which was through categories. And I think Laura will say a few words about the categorization process and some of the challenges.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sam. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I think with the categories, we knew it was really important to think really carefully about how to categorize them and which categories to choose, because I think there are a lot of overlaps in the public sector between NGOs and charities. So yeah, I think it was just really defining what makes a charitable trust and what is kind of an active NGO operating on the ground. And then there's also the religious question. There were some organizations that were religious on the outset, when they were first set up, but that might not be part of their mission now. So I think it was also questioning what counts as a religious organization. And then we had multiple, sometimes for the same organization, we would have different donations coming from different countries. So it was as well deciding when, which countries to pick, and also if there were kind of foreign aid organizations based in India, sometimes their addresses would come up as India and not as the original country where it kind of would have been sourced from. So yeah, there were quite a few questions to ask when doing this. So it was really interesting to work on.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And Laura and Abhinaya put in a lot of work into this categorization of these donors, which allowed us to do quite a bit of interesting work. Next slide, please. So just briefly to preview some of the visualizations that are possible, a very simple one is looking at changes in flows of the top donors over time. We learned quite a bit from this, seeing, for example, the effect of recent crackdowns by the Indian government on political donors and donors focused on human rights, as well as the rise of other donors like Help the Child Netherlands. So this is sort of a simple grouping. Next slide, please. Martin, who's been working with Go Labs, has substantially more advanced visualization skills than I do, and was able to produce some other diagrams as well that we learned quite a bit from. So this shows donor countries, the categories of the organizations that received them, and then the state that those organizations were based in. So we learn a fair amount. So for example, it's interesting to see just how much of Korea's giving is in the educational realm, and just how much of the educational money goes to Karnataka. Or for example, how much money from religious organizations is channeled into Kerala. Next slide, please. Again, we're able to look sort of, within sectors to understand which states are broken down, or which states receive in which sectors. Next slide, please. And again, sort of as a proof of concept, we wanted to look at who gives to whom and how much overlap. So this is another visualization that Martin produced that shows the top religious organizations on the left and the recipient organizations on the right, and shows that there's essentially no overlap between sort of recipients among the largest religious donors. You wonder how this might be different for, say, large foreign aid organizations or private foundations. And based on the categorization that Laura and Abhinaya did, we could now answer this question using a similar chart. Next slide, please. So next steps, this remains a fairly messy data set. I think one of our outputs will be some documentation on the data set and suggestions for procedures for categorizing donors, deduplicating donors, as well as recipients. I think as well, it's a very large data set that spans 10 years. So it's a natural candidate for an interactive dashboard that would allow people to filter by a year, filter by category, and so on. So this is, I think, the first time that this data set has been in the Hack and Learn, and I hope it continues, because it's a very big, very rich, complicated, messy data set that we can learn a lot from, but needs some substantial additional work. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sam, Laura, Gautam. What an incredible piece of work. I think the messiness of that data seems also to be what's exciting about it, and the analytical promise of that enormous bank of 10 years worth of data. Just wow. So amazing what you've managed to do in just 2 weeks to unpick some of that and look at these interesting overlaps and connections across different organizations. Fantastic. Next up, for our final presentation today, I would like to pass over to Hackteam 12. So it's Ian and Myra from the project pipeline.
Thank you, Elle. And thanks everyone for staying with us, the last team. So we're gonna I'm gonna talk about our project pipeline. The idea, our goal was to create a pipeline for the impact bonds that are being developed around the world, right? So our main challenges, as you can see, is and why we wanted to work on that project. It's because much of the learning takes place in the designing phase of the projects. And usually there are more projects, that are many ideas for projects than the launches itself. So we can take advantage of those ideas and what's being created. The idea is that the pipeline will be a tool
to facilitate network between communities with similar interests. It might be able to reduce transaction costs, and we want to raise awareness on how the dynamic works under the soil before the project is actually born. So next slide, please. Thank you. What did we do? We started with a data mapping. It was Mara's effort, actually. So what we did is that we put together two lists of variables, the INDIGO data set and Zach's survey, and we saw what came out of it and what we could use for our own data set. And what we learned with that. Next slide, please. Well, the main takeaways from what we've done so far, we reached two key definitions that are required to develop the pipeline. The first is that we need a minimum requirements for a project to be included in the pipeline. And the second is that we need minimum requirements for the project to go out of the data set. So, for example, if a project that is in our pipeline actually becomes a SIB, or if they are launched as something else, or if they are just not launched, what are the minimum requirements for the project to go out of the data set? One of our points of attention is that the stakeholders that are involved can think that sharing some of that information is sensitive. So we would have to check what information we can actually include. From the list of variables that I mentioned before, we will use about 5 of them as a must-have for the pipeline, and the others will be optional. And the other thing that we thought about is that there's a need to motivate the stakeholders to keep updating the pipeline. So we thought about producing a quarterly snapshot of the projects that are being developed and send to the stakeholders so that they'll see what's going on and remember to send us any updates that they have on their own projects. And now, Ian, if you want to continue, thanks.
Yeah, so in terms of the data definitions and the minimum requirement, we felt it was important to have a minimum requirement. You can see there a project can be included in the pipeline if there's at least one key stakeholder involved in its development. By key stakeholder, we mean an outcome funder, an investor, or a service provider. The point about that being to somehow, in a sense, to protect the integrity of the database so that you don't have lots of big ideas just being thrown in there by the bucket load. So it was about that. And we would have, in addition to obvious contact details, and so that people can network, there would be something about the area, the physical regional area that's happening in the world, and the sector, employability or education or health or whatever sector is. And that allows people coming onto that database to see where new ideas are developing and to potentially engage peer-to-peer. And it may be that peer-to-peer space is a really important learning space, but it's also a much safer space maybe for parties to share what might otherwise be commercially sensitive information, particularly if they're operating in different countries and under different jurisdictions. Then the commercial sensitivity is less of an issue then. So that those definitions probably need a little bit more clarification. And we'd be happy to hear that from people. If we can move to the next slide. I don't know who has control of the slides. Okay. So it's an ongoing discussion, and we're really interested to hear what different people think, especially around issues like that commercial sensitivity around what is the minimum expectation, the minimum standard or the minimum information from stakeholders to ensure the database has meaning and significance and effectiveness for networking, but also that it's, bear in mind, it's an emerging database. It's we don't want to let the perfect be the barrier to the good. You know, we'll start with something and we'll tweak it and we'll change it, and it'll grow and emerge as the database develops. But we want to have something that's active and engaging and brings people to it, because we're going to expect busy people to enter their data in here and give up the time to do that. And for that to happen, there needs to be a motivation. They need to be engaged, and that peer-to-peer learning opportunity might be part of that. And as I said earlier, I think there's I hadn't seen this till I saw the Wayfinder's presentation earlier, but I think there are connections there between the work of the Wayfinder Hackteam, because that could be a really useful tool for people who are exploring the pipeline or who have already placed data into the pipeline database. So the kind of cross-fertilization of learning here, which I think could be really useful, and it could provide a really rich mine of information for that peer-to-peer learning, but also for research and garnering that generic learning of how processes work, how a service moves from an idea to a reality, to a practice on the ground, and how that develops, and at what point it develops into being part of the mainstream database because it's been implemented. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Myra, and thank you, Ian. I love this description of the learning under the soil, and your humility to acknowledge that this is a prototype that needs to be developed and workshopped is fantastic. So it's all starting somewhere. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd like to pass first of all to Claire Fitzgerald for some comments on those three groups. Over to you, Claire.
Sure. It's been a pleasure to sort of sit here and listen to the different teams talk about the work, the impressive work that they've done over the past 2 weeks. And my immediate reactions are like, Sankey diagrams are beautiful, like digital pieces of lace, aren't they? It's just an astonishing visual. Anyway, my other ones are actually around the sort of the theme of matchmaking in the last three presentations, but across the pipeline in general. And by pipeline, I mean the presentations today. So it strikes me that we've got this common problem of like linking up entity that's paid for something and the entity that got paid, right? Or a process of trying to take a person all the way through an event like a vaccination appointment, and the difficulties of mapping out and linking these processes in their kind of tiniest, bittiest constituent parts. So this idea of the whole process needing to be broken down into concrete phases so we can understand the mechanisms behind these processes. We saw that with the donation data coming out of India, and maybe some common challenges of how that would be informed by the procurement sort of work also happening. How do we link entities that call themselves 14,000 different things in our databases? I think the other thing that was interesting to me is this notion of defining, and the idea that definitions are created in a group as opposed to perhaps imposed, and this need to work around and create a definition that functions in that process that people are trying to sense make around, whether it's a codification of the sectors that folks are perhaps donating in, or indeed elements of a particular contract. What do we call them? And are we sure that everyone agrees on what we're referring to? I think is a helpful thing to inquire about. So I'll stop there, we're short on time, but I really enjoyed it. And so very, very happy to be here and offer a commentary for whatever it's worth.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire. What a phenomenal 2 weeks we've had. A huge thanks to all of the members for each of the Hack Challenge teams, and particularly to those who have presented and shared their ideas with us this week. There are still questions, and we'll leave the Hack channels open because clearly the discussion is still going on. But I'd love to hand to Mara and Juliana to tell us about next steps and how can we keep this conversation going.
Okay.
Thank you. Juliana, do you want to go first? Because I was coming to you first.
Yes.
What's happening next?
Another important part of this Hack and Learn is the final result, which is a technical and learning report. We really want to keep track of these discussions and these lively conversations. So that's why we are writing a report, and we are inviting you to write it all together. Here on your left side, you can see an example of another technical and learning report that we wrote, and you can see how short stories or personal stories can interact with the main text of the report. We are especially interested in short stories or small stories about your experience on your participation here at the Hack and Learn. So if you are interested and you feel like you would like to participate, please connect with me on Slack, and I will be collecting your stories to start writing this technical and learning report, which will be published on our next INDIGO quarterly peer learning session, which I think it is on the 22nd of April. And over to Mara.
Yes. So I just want to put another date in your diary, which is our conference in September, where we will host another Hack and Learn to carry on this work. As Elle said, we will keep this channel open, so please keep the conversation going and progress. We see this opportunity as a way to create a connection and nurture our community. So it was great to see more people collaborating with each other, and I hope this will continue. I want in particular to thank you, because all your contribution was not done because this was part of your full-time job, not even your part-time job. So we achieved a lot in 2 weeks by spending some time in the evening. So let's please keep going. There is a lot of there are a lot of ideas there that we can take forward together. And for the conference in September, I just want to draw your attention that you can submit papers, but you can also suggest panel discussions. So if you were stimulated by a particular topic, just come forward and suggest a number of speakers you want to suggest at the conference to keep the discussion going and present some of the work to our audience. So with no further ado, we are at time. I just want to thank you again to help me learn and have so much fun. And I look forward to seeing you on the INDIGO channels in the coming months.
Thanks so much, everyone.